when you were going in to the conclave, did you have an idea in your head that Cardinal Prevost would be the next pope? And also on the subject of gnocchi, how was the food in the conclave?
We look for somebody who's a good shepherd, a good pastor, and that usually is translated into that part of his curriculum vitae would be extensive pastoral experience. Lord knows Pope Francis had it, and Lord knows Pope Leo XIV has had it. The food, let's just say it was a good impetus to get this over with. All right?
The US and China kicked off high-level trade negotiations in Switzerland on Saturday. It's a tentative first step towards diffusing a trade war between the world's two largest economies that has disrupted global markets. Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng resumed talks with US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent in Geneva after weeks of growing tensions. The trade dispute, combined with US President Donald Trump's decision last month to impose duties on dozens of other countries, has disrupted supply chains, unsettled financial markets, and stoked fears of a sharp global downturn. Earlier this week, President Trump suggested that an 80% tariff on Chinese goods seems right. That suggested for the first time a specific alternative to the 145% levies that he has imposed on Chinese imports.
I mean, we're going to see right now. You can't get any higher. It's at 145, so we know it's coming down.
Washington is seeking to reduce its trade deficit with Beijing and convince China to renounce what the US says is a mercantilist economic model and contribute more to global consumption. Beijing has pushed back against what it sees as external interference. It has also retaliated with 125% tariffs and said it would not bow down to imperialists and bullies. It wants Washington to lower tariffs, clarify what it wants China to buy more of, and treat it as an equal on the world stage. But with the distrust running high, both sides have been keen not to appear weak, and economic analysts have low expectations of a breakthrough. While Trump has suggested the discussions were initiated by China, Beijing said the US requested them, and that China's policy of opposing US tariffs had not changed. China could be looking for the same 90-day waiver on tariffs that Washington has given other countries. Any kind of tariff reduction and follow-up talks would be seen as positive by investors.
It was agreed.
Pakistan and India agreed to a ceasefire deal on Saturday after a fourth day of deadly strikes. The foreign ministries of both countries confirmed the ceasefire, which US President Donald Trump described as, quote, full and immediate. It came after both sides launched strikes and counter-strikes against each other's military earlier that day. That prompted calls from the US to, quote, re-establish direct communication to avoid miscalculation. The clashes have been the most intense fighting between the nuclear-armed neighbours in nearly 3 decades. India's foreign ministry said the heads of India's and Pakistan's military operations will speak again on May the 12th. Amid heightened tensions, residents across the two countries have been rushing to stockpile food and essentials, while families near the border have fled. Locked in a long-standing dispute over Kashmir, the two countries have engaged in daily clashes since Wednesday, when India struck multiple locations in Pakistan that it said were, quote, terrorist camps. That's after a deadly attack on Hindu tourists in Indian Kashmir last month, which Pakistan denies involvement in. The latest round of clashes have left dozens dead in both countries.
Side by side with China's Xi Jinping, Russia's Vladimir Putin marked the 80th anniversary of the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany in World War II on Friday. A major military parade in Moscow went off without any reports of Ukrainian attacks, with 3 years of devastating war as a backdrop. In a speech in Red Square, Putin said Russia would never accept attempts to belittle the Soviet Union's decisive role in defeating Nazi Germany, but recognized the role of Western allies.
We will always remember that the opening of the second front in Europe after decisive battles on the territory of the Soviet Union brought the victory closer. We highly value the contribution to our common struggle by the soldiers of the Allied armies, the resistance fighters, the courageous people of China, all those who fought for a peaceful future.
Putin made no criticism of the West and referred only in passing to the Ukraine war, Europe's deadliest since World War II. Drones were paraded for the first time, as well as tanks and intercontinental missiles capable of carrying nuclear warheads. More than 11,500 troops lined up, including 1,500 who have fought in Ukraine. Chinese troops took part in the parade, and Putin shook hands with North Korean officers, praising them for their fighting skill. North Korean soldiers have helped Russia fight an incursion into its western Kursk region by Ukrainian forces, seeking a bargaining chip in any peace talks. The Kremlin says the attendance of Russian allies, such as Xi, Brazilian President Lula da Silva, and several dozen leaders from around the world shows Russia is not isolated. Ukraine attacked Moscow with drones for several days this week, though there were no reports of major attacks on Moscow on Friday, amid a 72-hour ceasefire declared by Putin. US President Donald Trump on Thursday called for a 30-day unconditional ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine and said if the truce was not respected, then the US and its partners will impose further sanctions. In Kyiv, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called on allies to help it resist Russia, which now controls about a fifth of Ukraine.
Astronauts and rovers could soon have a GPS-like navigation system to get around the moon. The technology was unveiled by Spanish tech company GMV. They hope it can get humans one step closer to establishing permanent bases in space.
With this software, we bring Europe closer to establishing a presence of humans on the moon, and potentially this would be a stepping stone towards a Mars exploration or a human presence on Mars.
Called Lupin, the project is part of a program by the European Space Agency. It aims to test new positioning, navigation, and timing techniques as interest in lunar surface exploration picks up. Project manager Stephen Kay says the technology was put to the test on the otherworldly landscapes on Fuerteventura, one of Spain's Canary Islands, which bears some resemblance to the lunar surface.
Here in Fuerteventura, we've been testing the algorithms, we've been developing software, and we've been testing and collecting data sets in order to navigate and to localize or identify our location on the moon, similar to how on Earth we do with GPS and with our phones every day.
Currently, navigating the moon is challenging. Spacecraft on its surface rely on complex calculations and data relayed from Earth, which is neither quick nor precise. The lack of real-time updates on changes in the moon's terrain from recent impacts or lunar dust movements also hinder ground trips. By using signals similar to GPS from moon-orbiting satellites, Lupin could help pinpoint locations on the moon in real time. GMV also wants to combine existing lunar cartography with satellite data of the moon's dark spots, an area generally in shadow. The company's head of strategy, Mariela Graziano, says mapping out the moon's surface will one day allow astronauts to work there and set up permanent bases.